What's going on, everyone? My name is Mr. Rage, and welcome back to another one of my game reviews. Now, as you guys know, I have already reviewed Dying Light's gameplay, but this game had such amazing gameplay that I actually had to make a video dedicated to just the gameplay side, and this is going to be part 2 of my review, which we will talk about the story side as well as some things that I missed in my previous video. One thing I missed in my previous video was talking a little bit more about the game's combat. This game's combat, like I said in my previous review, the combat in this game is some of the best I have seen in a first-person melee game. One thing I forgot to mention is there is some skills in this game for the combat side make it even more fun. You've got the drop kick, which is one of the most popular things about Dying Light. You've got a dodge mechanic, which makes the combat more satisfying. Like when you dodge an enemy attack and then you actually manage to blow their head off with a baseball bat. As well as others, like you have a takedown move where you could instantly take down enemies by sneaking up on them or by basically dazing them out, because you could actually also kind of daze enemies out if you hit them hard enough. Like you even see like a cool animation of their bones cracking, all Mortal Kombat style. Like it's almost like an X-ray attack from Mortal Kombat, and then you could perform basically a finishing move, which is your takedown move. So those are just a couple of things I forgot to mention about the combat in my previous review. But yeah, combat, absolutely amazing. Now, Dying Light, if you watch my previous review, everything about this game's gameplay was perfect. You've got a fantastic RPG system, you've got great parkour, a great open world filled with details and jam-packed with all kinds of things for the player to do. Great combat, great RPG, and a plethora of other great things. But what about the story now? Unfortunately, this is where Dying Light kind of falls flat on its face. I don't know what it is about Techland, but they are so good at actually creating gameplay. Like when it comes to gameplay, they're perfect at making gameplay. And now that they're actually experienced with open world games, I'm actually excited to see what Techland comes with next, because they are absolutely amazing when it comes to actually putting the proper and fun gameplay into their games. But when it comes to the story, Techland just kind of fails. I don't know who they have at their offices writing their scripts for their games, but they should be fired because their game's story is just not very good. Even Dead Island had a terrible story. One of the worst I've ever seen in a zombie game. It's even worse than Dead Rising. It's worse than The Last of Us. Yes, I said it. The Last of Us has a bad story. Fight me. Anyways, Techland they suck at actually making story in their games. Dying Light's story is, well, I wouldn't want to say it's bad because I'm not trying to be negative here, but I just can't in good conscience tell you that it's actually good either. I feel like it's kind of like something in between. The story is as cliche as your typical zombie story, but it is unique in some aspects. And Techland, you could tell Techland definitely tried to make the story good, because a fun fact if you didn't know, one of the reasons why Techland actually stopped making Dead Island is because they wanted to make a more serious and dark and gritty zombie game, and Dead Island just wasn't that. But Deep Silver wanted Dead Island to be more fun and flashy like Dead Rising, so that's actually one of the reasons why Techland left. It's also probably one of the reasons why the Dead Island trailer was so dark, because Techland probably wanted Dead Island to be a dark and gritty zombie game. That's actually why they created Dying Light, and if this is what they were trying to create, not only did they fail, but they somehow managed to do worse than the Dead Island story, because at least the Dead Island story was somewhat unique because it took place on a zombie-infested island. This game's story is, it's just not good. It's just not good. The story is the equivalent of a cringy B-movie type zombie movie. That's how bad it is. So let's start off with the beginning. So instead of the zombie virus taking place in America, where there's obese fat people everywhere and guns are on every corner, it takes place in a foreign country called Haran. And that's probably the only unique thing about this game. It's somewhat unique because, since it takes place in a foreign country and it hasn't spread across the world yet, the game actually seems like it's based in reality, or at least that's what it's trying to do, because it does seem somewhat realistic. Because, usually when a country is infected by a virus, usually that country does end up getting quarantined off from the rest of the other country. So the story of Dying Light is somewhat realistic. I'll admit it is somewhat realistic, because after the virus breaks out in Harran is then quarantined by the GRE, who are basically this global relief effort type organization that work with the government. And yeah, Harran is basically quarantined off from the rest of the world, and they don't know if everyone's dead or if there are still survivors within Harran. So everyone starts panicking, wondering if the virus is going to spread to the rest of the world. It's realistic, especially after what happened during 2020. It's definitely realistic. It's a realistic approach, and the concept is realistic, but the execution was just not good enough. So the main story of the game, and before we talk about the main story, we got to talk about the actual Harran virus, which is basically the zombie virus that starts everything. In the game, it's explained that the Harran virus is a variation of rabies. I'm getting so fed up with all these zombie games using rabies as their virus, but instead of it being normal rabies, it's just super rabies. It's basically just a mutated form of rabies. So many zombie games keep using the same idea for the actual virus. Imagine a zombie game that had an actual realistic virus. I know people are going to say it's The Last of Us, but The Last of Us had a parasitical virus, not an actual OG virus like rabies or smallpox. Like, I'm just getting fed up with all of this rabies bullshit. Even Left 4 Dead's green flu virus was basically a variation or a mutation of rabies. So the Harran virus, it's your typical zombie virus. It also does not make any sense whatsoever. There is no way in hell that even a mutated version of rabies can turn humans into jacked up monsters or fucking volatile looking motherfuckers. Because if you look at the volatiles, there's no way that rabies could actually do that to a person, even if it was mutated. A mutated version of rabies would act more like the zombies from that one found footage film called Quarantine. So it's just extremely unrealistic. The virus is unrealistic. Also, not only that, but how the fuck did it even get in Harran? The game doesn't even explain how the virus even came to be. I mean, except for there's these conspiracy theories. There's this one character in the game called David, and he basically explains to you, the player, that the virus was created and sent by an extraterrestrial race that they are trying to use to enslave humanity. Very, very original. I mean, it is kind of cool, because the idea basically kind of supports the fact that maybe aliens exist within the Dying Light universe. But I think that's bullshit. Another conspiracy theory in the game suggests that the virus was actually created by the GRE themselves and was sent to Harran to see the effects of the virus on human beings. And yeah, that's basically the zombie virus of the game. Pretty typical stuff. Now time to get to the actual story. Dying Light is about a man named Kyle Crane who worked with the GRE and was sent to Harran to receive a highly sensitive file from one of the GRE's other agents that have gone rogue on them, named Kadir Suleiman, aka Rise. Rise was working with the GRE before and was sent to Harran. Or no, he wasn't sent to Harran. He already lived in Harran, but the GRE basically, he worked with the GRE to try and maintain order in Harran. But unfortunately for the GRE, Rise demanded that the GRE save his brother and get him out of Harran. And of course the GRE fails, and now the villain is all pissed because they failed to save his brother, and now he's against the GRE and he wants revenge. And to get his revenge, he basically steals one of the GRE's highly sensitive files, and Kyle Crane, who is the main protagonist of the game, is sent to receive that file and to basically either take down Rise or just see if he's still alive. The story, like I said, it's alright, it's not horrible. Rise is a decent villain. I mean, he's no Vaz Matronego, but he's a decent villain. You know, he's your typical sadistic psychopath because after he decides to turn against the GRE, he also turns into a rootless fucking warlord and also starts basically killing survivors who don't side with him and survivors who don't give them their money for Rise's protection because, of course, Rise also has his own little club, you know, his own little gang of other psychopathic survivors within Haran. Another thing I don't like about Dying Light story is the whole humans are also bad thing. You know, I've never liked this concept in any zombie type story, you know, where humans are represented as being even worse than the zombies themselves. I've always hated that. So that's another thing that Dying Light is guilty of. I mean, it's not all bad because the zombies are definitely the main threat of the game. It's just that I don't really like the whole idea of a human being being the main threat, you know? I always wanted a zombie game where the virus was the main threat and so were the zombies, and Dying Light just doesn't do that. But hey, that's my own personal criticism. I mean, maybe this works great for you, I don't know, but anyways, so Rise basically turns into a warlord, and he also starts capturing antizin crates. And what antizin is some kind of medicine that basically slows down the symptoms of the Haran virus and basically gives a person a little bit of time before they inevitably turn. And these antizin crates are sent by the GRE. So is food, water, and other survival resources. And the GRE sends them via planes, right? And Rise and his men, or his gang, basically capture these crates and force... Can you stop it? Anyways, as I was saying, Rise basically sends his men to steal these crates from the other survivors, and he then forces those survivors to either beg for those antizin crates or to either work for Rise and join his gang, or else they'll just die if they are infected. So Rise is basically just a sadistic warlord. That's all he is. He's not that much of a dangerous villain, you know? He's just a crazy guy with a gang that just wants to fuck with people or just kill people for his own sadistic pleasure. And you know, he is a bit of a dick because Rise also promises protection to other survivors from his men if they pay him or give Rise their money and their resources. So Rise is honestly, he's just your typical cliche bad guy, you know? There's not a lot of unique things about him. Now let's talk about the actual protagonist. Kyle Crane is definitely a decent protagonist. I mean, he's better than the fucking antagonist, that's for sure. I mean, he's your typical action hero, basically. When he first arrives in Haran, he's basically a good little soldier and obeys what the GRE tells him to do. But Crane starts to realize that the GRE are basically being douchebags themselves, even bigger douchebags than Rise, and Crane eventually turns against the GRE and decides to help the people of Haran instead of obeying the GRE. And you know, one thing I didn't like is around the beginning of the game, the GRE wants Crane to basically confirm Rise's identity. So during a segment where antizin is sent for the survivors, Crane is sent to retrieve one of the antizin packs, and the GRE basically tells him to burn it all, so that way he'll have to beg Rise for antizin. It was at that moment that Crane should have realized that the GRE were bad. So, Crane was kind of a dick at the beginning of the game. But, you know, as the game goes on, he definitely receives decent character development. You know, the more he stays in Haran, the more he starts to actually care for the people and the survivors who are actually left in Haran. And he basically turns into this type of savior or hero of the fallen city. So, Kyle Crane was definitely a great character, in my opinion. He also had a decent personality as well. You know, he's kind of, he's sassy, he's sarcastic at times, or sometimes he's just downright serious. It's awesome when he actually gets pissed and just goes ape shit on the bad guys during some of the cutscenes. So yeah, Kyle Crane, he's definitely a great protagonist in my opinion. I mean, he's no Leon or Ethan Winters or Sebastian Castellanos or Bill Overbeck, but he was definitely a great character in my opinion, in his own way. Now let's talk about some of the other characters. So within the city of Haran, there is basically this giant tower where most of the survivors within the slums of Haran, basically that's where they all stay. And throughout the story, Kyle Crane, basically, you have the option of going out and receiving antizin crates for them or just supply crates. So it's kind of like, it's accurate of Kyle Crane, because Kyle Crane eventually starts to care for all of these survivors in the tower. Like, even though he doesn't know them, he slowly starts to care more about them, and he slowly starts to want to protect them more. And he even wants to save the city and the people. So Kyle Crane, he's definitely a great character. And the characters in the other game, I mean, the other characters are also decent. I mean, some of the NPCs are honestly better than some of the main characters, but the NPCs, they're decent. They're also realistic. Some NPCs seem genuinely scared, like they should be. Some seem depressed. Some are trying to lighten up the mood by telling jokes, or some are just, having conversations or just trying to do their own thing. I mean, in the tower, for example, you even see people just doing their own thing. You see people on the radios trying to communicate with the outside world. You see others doing exercise. You see some eating. You see some, just, watching TV, or trying to, at least, it's, the characters are definitely decent. And now back to the main story at hand here. Within the city, there is also this scientist named Dr. Zero and Dr. Campton, who are trying to create a cure for the virus. And for whatever reason, the GRE wants that document. But it turns out that the real reason why they want it is because the GRE are actually trying to weaponize the virus. Oh, wow. The GRE is actually corrupted. Turns out they were actually corrupted and weren't on anybody's side. Wow, so original. So yeah, it turns out that the GRE were actually trying to weaponize the virus, and that's actually what was on the file that Crane was sent to retrieve by the GRE from Rise. So doesn't that mean that Rise is actually the good guy, since he knows that the GRE is corrupt and wants to upload that file? Because of course Rise also wants to upload the file for the public to see, and he basically wants to expose the GRE. So doesn't that mean that Rise is actually the good guy, even though he's a sadistic killing psychopath? I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because if the GRE is corrupt and he wants to upload that file, doesn't that mean that he's the good guy? Like, doesn't that mean that Crane is actually the bad guy for obeying the GRE, or at least in the beginning he was obeying the GRE? Oh, but it's probably because Crane didn't know what was on the file until, of course, Rise tells him. So yeah, that's pretty much the story of the game. The GRE also plans on nuking the city, of course, all Resident Evil style, like bombing Raccoon City. The story of Dying Light, it's okay, it's not bad. The missions are also good, because, what would an open world game be without the missions? The missions in the game are also good, they're fun, and they do offer good bits of the story, it has good pacing. So do the side missions. The side missions, they're fine. I mean, I've never really liked side missions too much. I'm just not a huge fan of side missions, but the side missions, they're okay. So that pretty much does the story of Dying Light. Definitely not a bad one, but definitely not a very good one either. I just want to also say that do not let this review turn you off from this game. This game didn't even need to have a story. This game could have been like DayZ or 7 Days to Die, and it still would have been a fantastic game, because the gameplay is simply fantastic. And not only that, but the gameplay makes the story better, because since the gameplay is so enjoyable, you come around to enjoying the story as well. And the story, you've got good characters, even some of the assholes in the game are decent characters, they're well written. It's just a story that didn't seem to be very good in my opinion, but the story was okay, the gameplay was awesome. And you've also got a large amount of DLC in this game, so honestly, you've got so much here in Dying Light, so do not let this story review turn you off. If you are someone who enjoys story more than gameplay, then I don't even know how you consider yourself a gamer. I would say you're more of a movie guy if you prefer story over gameplay in a video game, but if you are, then I guess you're not going to like this game. But if you are someone like me who actually knows that the gameplay is more important than the story, do not let this review turn you off. Definitely play Dying Light. It is too good to be missed on. The story gets a 6 out of 10 from me. It's alright, but to me, Dying Light is a 10 out of 10. One of the best games ever made. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this review. This will be my final review on the OG version of Dying Light. I will have a review coming for Dying Light the following once I actually get a chance to play it. But yeah, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this review of Dying Light story. And be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next video. This was Mr. Rage signing off. Bye-bye, guys, and have a good one.